In this video, we're going to talk about the new Player's Handbook 5.24 and how it's changed the game so that there are house rules you no longer need, there are some house rules you still need, and then there are some new house rules that you maybe need to make. But before we jump in, I just want to clarify that I think that the new Player's Handbook or the new edition of Dungeons & Dragons is going to be a better edition than the last one. But I think it is okay to critique it on the merit that it's not a new edition, it's a revision, purposefully made to clear out complexities, fix errors with the game, improve quality of life. And I think it's very, very reasonable for us as consumers, as players who spend a lot of money and a lot of time playing Dungeons & Dragons, to ask ourselves and to ask Wizards of the Coast, did you do a good job? Did you do what you set out to do? Or are there things that you failed at, so that hopefully we can get a better product? That's just a quick little rant about why I think videos like these are warranted. It's not to hate on Wizards of the Coast. I think they do a lot of good work, but it's also okay to tell them when they do a lot of not so good work. And this video will have a bit of both. So first, house rules you no longer need. Surprise has been changed to advantage instead of just a free turn, which is out to win, especially at later levels. It was something that I had already implemented in our higher level campaign, because it ended up being something where the players could very easily get surprised or be surprised in some cases, and that would just kind of decide the combat, or at least make it very difficult for me to balance an encounter, because I didn't know, are they going to get surprised or not? If they get surprised, this encounter needs to be twice as hard. Now it's been balanced, it's much better, it's more fair, it's more balanced. You no longer need to house rule surprise, at least in my opinion. Then there's the drinking potions rule. Drinking a potion is now, instead of being an action, it's just a bonus action. It was played this way at many tables, I believe, and now it's part of the core rules, and I like that. I don't know if it's for all potions or just the potion of healing. Either case, potion of healing is like the big one where you want to be able to do it as a bonus action. I could see some more powerful potions being actions, but we'll have to see. But either way, I'm happy that they have made this change, because I think it was warranted. Then of course there's the inspiration and how that works, because it was really just advantage, and a lot of people, our table included, when we used inspiration, used it instead as something where you could roll after the fact, or you could re-roll just like luck, and that is the better way to do it, and that's also what they've done now in the rules. So again, makes a lot of sense. You no longer need to house rule that. Then there's the monk, which at our table at least, we for years had a house rule monk that dealt more damage, that had a stunning strike, that instead of costing key were proficiency bonus per long rest, and then you only stun until the start of your next turn. The kind of balance fixes that they've made, or they've made similar balance fixes at least, they've actually gone even further than we did in our homebrew version, and upped its defensive capabilities a lot as well. And I'm happy to say that the monk is in a much better place. It's probably the best pure martial class out there right now. Remains to be seen, but it's really, really good. It's fun. It looks fun and playable. So yeah, no more need to house rule the monk, I think, which is great. And then there are the spells, of course. There are a lot of spell changes in the Player's Handbook, a lot of old spells that have been tweaked, rebalanced. Some have been nerfed, some have been buffed, and I think that overall there are a lot of good changes. One that I would like to highlight is, of course, the summoning or the conjuration spells, because we had a house rule at our table for like years that you couldn't summon more than 2 creatures or objects to command at any time, because I honestly didn't want to bother with it, having 10 little things flying around. But with the new changes to animate objects and various conjuration spells, I think that house rule will no longer be needed. Of course, there's still animate dead, I think, which hasn't been tweaked really, but again, it was never a great spell to use, so probably we won't see that being used too much, and I think that house rule no longer is required. There's of course other small spell changes, like Force Cage now has concentration and a gold cost. That Hero's Feast has been toned down a bit, which is probably warranted. And yeah, daylight makes sunlight now. Whoever came up with that idea, like, yeah, daylight, maybe it should make daylight, that person deserves their raise this year, because wow. Yeah, so no more need to house rule that. And then we go to the house rules that you still need. The first, Rangers. We are 10 years in, and God knows how many hours of development, and the Ranger is still weird. It's definitely better, albeit it has less flavor than before, but it's also just really odd, and it's tied up to Hunter's Mark, which is just not a great spell necessarily, and is now even easily outshined by Divine Favor, which is a bonus action, no concentration, 1d4 to all attacks against all enemies kind of spell. Likewise, the Ranger's Capstone, which just increases the Hunter's Mark damage from 1d6 to 1d10. That is really, really bad. It was also bad before, but it's still really bad, and it just looks so bland and bad in comparison with barbarians and monks that get +4 to each of their 2 main stats, which increases, of course, their AC and their damage and their to hit and everything, while the ranger gets, on average, 2 extra damage if they're using the concentration level 1 spell instead of any of the other concentration spells. For me, the ranger still needs some house ruling to make it a viable, competitive, fun to play class, and it's a pretty easy fix to get it most of the way. Let Hunter's Mark be concentration-less from like level 6 or 7, something where you can't just dip in and grab it maybe, and then change the capstone to 2d6 damage instead of 1d10. You could go even further on that, I'd say. You could even give it a flat boost to some stats, just like the monk and barbarian gets, so that's a quick fix anyway. Then we have the stealth rules, which have been house ruled by I think every table since the 5e came out, because the rules for it in 5e were just impossible to use, basically. We've had this discussion already. I just made a video last week talking about it, so I won't go too deep into it. And there was a lot of discussion in the comments of the video. Some people actually liking the changes, some people defending them, some people agreeing that it was really, really weird. I think that what we maybe can everyone agree on is that it's not great. If they improved the rules, they didn't make easier to understand necessarily how exactly they work, and they did open up a lot of loopholes in terms of who can see me, who cannot, how does the invisibility condition works, and why does it work sometimes and not other times. Yeah, I think it's a hot mess that will require DM oversight if nothing else, and I think it's a shame, but we're still in the same place that we were before, and yeah, hopefully we'll get some sage advice that will make it really clear how it's supposed to work, so there's no confusion, or it's less easy to be confused. But I would have loved for that to be in the core rules, so there was no confusion in the core rules, and it was easy for a new DM, new players to understand, okay, this is how stealth works. And spells again. So while they did fix some spells, they sure didn't fix them all. And I'm looking at you: Heat Metal, Leomon's Tiny Hut, Banishment, Find Traps, Simulacrum, Wish, Shield, Spike Growth, and there's a ton others. Some are, of course, more egregious errors than others, but there are still plenty of spells that are useless, Find Traps, for example, and some that are game-breaking in unfun ways, such as Spike Growth might be the worst offender, seeing that it's still automatic damage, and there are so many new ways that you can push, pull, and drag other creatures that you basically have to come up with a house rule if you want to prevent optimizing players from using the cheese grater strategy, where they just grapple a creature and drag it in and out of your spike growth or along the edges of the spike growth, dealing tons of damage at early levels. So that's something that I will be house ruling if my players decide to get up to those sort of shenanigans. And then something like Leomon's Tiny Hut, just give it a 100 TB gold cost or a pool of hit points that monsters can get through or something like that, because it needs to be something you only do if you really need it, or something that is not automatically just going to give you a safe night rest. I know it's been tweaked a bit, but it's still basically not too much has changed about Leomon's Tiny Hut. It's still an automatic secure long rest as a ritual, which is just boring gameplay, I think. All right, and then moving on to new house rules that you now need. The first one is backgrounds. No surprise there. I've talked about backgrounds in another video as well, and how much I loathe and hate the changes that they've made to backgrounds. You can call it an optional rule because it might be in the DMG, or you can call it a house rule, whatever you want to call it. I'm betting that more than half of all tables are going to allow for mix and match backgrounds, where you just allow the players to pick a feat, a starter feat, 2 skills they want, 2 stats that they want to improve, and then not bother with the rest of it, which is, again, not a huge deal if your DM allows that, but it's still something where just put that stuff in the core rulebook, in the player's handbook, so that players are not confused. Then there's also something a bit weird, I think, that they've introduced in the new rules, which is there's a lot of no save bullshit. So like the wolf now has a safeless knockdown. There's weapons and abilities that push or knock prone without a change to resist them. And we had some of that before. Warlock's repelling blast, or whatever it was called, where it could push people with Eldritch Blast, was one that comes to mind. But now we have a lot more of it, and I've never liked the safeless features that just does things. You don't have a save, because it can really be abused in some cases, so that some encounters, some monsters that would otherwise rely on saving throws or legendary resistances can be pushed around, knocked prone, or you can do stuff to them that I don't think you necessarily should be allowed or able to do without giving the monster a chance to not be handled in that way. Likewise, monsters that just knock players prone, so that, and that's something we see a lot. It seems that they have changes so that monster stat blocks, at least as far as I can tell from what I've seen, are not going to have an attack and then you have a saving throw, and I can see why you would make that change. It can sometimes be a bit awkward to make that many rolls. It makes combat longer. On the other hand, strength saving throws were already pretty bad, and if those effects are mostly going to target things that knock you prone, knock you back, slow you down, which would probably be strength saving throws in some cases, strength saving throws becomes even worse for the characters to prioritize. And it just seems unfair. Hey, I built this 7 feet tall barbarian with 20 strength, and this little meager wolf can just knock me prone, no save, because I don't know. It just doesn't seem fun, and it's something that I would probably go in and maybe house rule a bit, or at least tweak the monsters and tweak some of the features. Likewise, it's now also baked in that creatures can choose to fail saves, which is a change that I like in principle, because it saves you from having to write that on every single feature and spell. Hey, a creature can choose to fail this saving throw. It does open up from some weirdness where you can charm or dominate a creature to then force it to automatically fail its saving throw, so you can keep it charmed or dominated forever. So generally a lot of weirdness there. Talking about spells, we're back here. There were some spells that were fixed, there were some spells that were not fixed, and then there are some spells that were introduced in the new edition that are problematic, and some spells that have just been buffed or altered in weird ways. So yeah, I think that's really, really odd that you go in and fix the problematic spells and we're gonna do this, and then you add new problems. It just seems like an oversight. There's a few to pick from, but one that really stands out to me is Conjure Minor Elementals, which is just completely nuts when combined with multiple attacks or spells such as Scorching Ray. A monk who can somehow cast Conjure Minor Elementals would be devastating. There's some stuff there where it's like, please, for the love of God, we can forgive you maybe for not fixing all of the problematic spells. I can't really. I think they should have done that, but adding in new problems, that's heavy. Lastly, there's some various weirdness in the rules, stuff that is too minor to sort of make a big stink out every one of them, but things that I may pay for a DM to be aware of that has been introduced in the new rules. So, for example, the Cleric's Divine Intervention that now allow for a single action Hallow spell, which is completely broken. There's also something with opportunity attacks now being allowed against allies, combined with the rule where you can automatically choose to fail saves, and you can do all kinds of weird stuff where you can push your allies across the battlefield by shoving them as a reaction, or you can cast with Warcaster buff spells on them as a reaction just by having them moving out of your range. So you could cast Cure Wounds as a reaction on an ally because the rules as written technically allow you to do so when they move out of your range. There's some stuff there where it's like, maybe you should have thought about that. Of course, there's obviously a bunch of stuff that I missed, whether it's great fixes that they've made, fixes that they haven't made, or new problems that they've introduced. I'd love to hear your thoughts on those in the comments down below if you saw something that you thought was noteworthy. Aside from that, very excited to cover more stuff about the new edition of Dungeons & Dragons, and if you want to see some of the stuff that we do, also for Dungeons & Dragons, of course, or 5e at least, you can check out the links in the description. There's links to our pre-order book, Delve, which is going to be awesome, filled with great dungeons. There's links to Wander's Guide to Enchanted Emporiums, our bestseller, and a lot of other works that we've made. So yeah, check that out. Aside from that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.